my girlfriend announced. I'm going to live with my best friend for economic reasons. Without consulting me, I replied, that is perfect for me. That night, a single sentence of mine left her packing her bags in tears. There is a peculiar type of silence that comes after a storm. It is not peace yet. No, it is more the feeling that the wind has finally died down, leaving you to contemplate the remains of what was knocked down. For me, the storm had a name, Rachel, my girlfriend for 4 years. And the debris was the life I thought we were building together. However, sitting in the midst of that void, I understood something essential. The hurricane did not destroy my foundations. It simply cleared away a structure that was already rotten at the root. I am not an easy man to deceive. I work as a systems analyst, and my entire career is based on detecting patterns, predicting failures, and understanding how a simple change can cause a complete network to collapse. I applied that same logic in my personal life. That is why I never understood men who complained that their partners ignored them or spent excessively. With Rachel, I believed I had built something solid. We had common goals, a shared project. From the beginning, I was impressed by her ambition and the clarity with which she laid out her 5-year plan. I earned more money, so I contributed a larger share to our savings fund. But she also contributed. Every decision was debated, and that cooperation was what I valued. I saw her as my partner in building a future, brick by brick. The only variable that never quite fit into that equation was Anthony, her best friend. He was one of those who live pretending they are about to succeed, but without ever taking the final step. He wore expensive clothes he could not afford. He drove a leased car with overdue payments and spoke with the arrogance of someone who had never faced real consequences. He was always present, making comments in a joking tone that put me in a bad light, just enough to seem harmless. Rachel constantly defended him. He is like a brother to me. He does not have the stability that you have, Michael. That "you are the stability" became a title that, without me realizing it, loaded me with responsibilities, and last Tuesday, she decided to test how much weight I could bear. She came home with a strange energy, a mix of nervousness and artificial enthusiasm. She sat with me on the sofa we had chosen together after 3 weekends of visiting stores and dropped the news as if it were a prize. I have something incredible to tell you. Anthony's roommate is leaving at the end of the month, so I am moving in with him. I remained silent, waiting for the joke. It never came. She continued, talking hurriedly, as if she knew she had to justify the absurdity. Think about it, Michael. It is just for economic reasons. His rent is much cheaper than my share of the expenses here. I could save an extra $1,000 every month. That would speed up our goal of buying a house. It is the perfect solution. I did not respond. Silence was my strategy. She wanted a reaction, maybe an argument in which she could paint me as controlling or insecure. I did not give it to her. I evaluated every possible scenario, went over all the variables in my head, and found the clearest path. I smiled at her calmly, a sincere smile. You are right, Rachel. That fits perfectly. The bewilderment on her face was immediate. The expression of someone preparing for a fight melted into confusion. It was not in her script. Really? She stammered. Absolutely, I replied naturally. It is a brilliant financial decision. Sacrificing a little now for a greater benefit later. It is that kind of mentality that makes me most proud of you. From that moment, she lost control of the situation. She spent the entire night talking to me enthusiastically about how much she could contribute to the house fund, how fantastic it would be to live with Anthony, and how mature we were being by handling this with such serenity. I nodded, offering supportive comments here and there. I played the role of the understanding boyfriend perfectly. Later, when she finished a call with Anthony in which they were looking at apartment ads between laughs and plans, I waited. I let her savor her apparent triumph. When she hung up, I sat in front of her seriously. I have been thinking about what you said, I began in a slow voice. And you have inspired me. I saw her frown cautiously. What do you mean? If you are willing to take a big step to accelerate our savings, I will do the same. Tomorrow they will send me the final contract. The project starts in 3 weeks. The silence that followed was the real storm. In fact, I had already made a firm decision. The lease on our apartment would end at the end of the month. The timing was almost perfect, do not you think? When I told her that, I saw the color drain from her face. You terminated the lease? She asked in disbelief. And where am I going to stay when I come back to visit? Visit, Rachel, I replied calmly. The goal was to save money. Flights from Europe are expensive. We both have to be disciplined. This is what you wanted, a smart financial decision. Then I delivered the final blow. Since we are going to manage our finances separately for the next 2 years, we should divide our shared assets now. It is the most logical thing to do. I had already prepared a spreadsheet with the breakdown of the money in the joint account, the furniture, and everything we had accumulated. We needed to define who would get what. She looked at me, unable to articulate a word. The plan she had devised with Anthony, in which she could live with him while maintaining my financial backing, had completely fallen apart. She thought she was taking a simple step, without realizing she had actually detonated a total collapse. The confusion in her eyes turned into pure fear. That same night she started packing, but not with the joy of before, but in tears. 2 weeks have passed since that night I dismantled what she thought was our future. Everything unfolded exactly as I had anticipated, though with a much more satisfying taste. I appreciate the messages of support. It is comforting to know that clear and logical thinking is still valued amidst so much confusion. The next day, Rachel woke up with eyes swollen from crying and desperately tried to back down. I was not thinking clearly. Moving in with Anthony is a silly idea. I do not want to do it, and you should not go to Europe either. We are better together. I just shook my head, showing a gesture of deep but firm sadness. I cannot, Rachel. I already signed the contract. If I back out now, I will be blacklisted from my company. My career would be over. And you know, I had not signed anything. Of course, it was a fake contract, a PDF that I created in a couple of hours with official letterheads I copied from my company's website. She had no way of finding out. Besides, I used her own words against her. You said it yourself. It is a smart financial move. We have to think long-term. A couple of years apart is a small price to pay for a lifetime of stability. Every argument she tried to make, I shot down with her own initial logic. She had set the trap, and I just made sure to close the door on her. The process of dividing what we had was devastating for her. She discovered that almost all the money in our joint account came from my contributions, about 90%. When I transferred to her only what she had deposited over all those years, she was stunned by how insignificant the sum was. And the interest? She asked with a trembling voice. It is distributed proportionally to the initial investment, I answered calmly, as if it were obvious. The furniture was another battlefield. She pointed to the sofa, the dining table, the television. We can sell all this and split the money, she suggested. I pulled out another spreadsheet with receipts in hand. I bought the sofa and the television before I met you, and I paid for the dining table as a gift when we moved in. None of that is shared. At the end of the day, the only things she kept were her clothes, some kitchen utensils, and a small amount of cash. The comfortable life she had enjoyed was exposed. I had financed almost everything. A week later, she moved in with Anthony. At first, she was quiet. I imagined she was trying to pretend everything was fine. She posted pictures on her social media with him, toasting with wine in their new apartment, and using phrases like new beginnings and excited for this stage. But soon the calls began. The first problem was the car, even though she used it. It was in my name and I paid the insurance. I called her to inform her that since I was moving to Europe, I would sell it and cancel the policy. Her voice reflected genuine panic. How am I going to get to work, Michael? You cannot do this to me. It is a financial decision, Rachel. I cannot pay for a car I am not going to use for 2 years. Then came the phone bill. It was included in my family plan, and I informed her that I would be removing her at the end of the cycle. The same happened with the streaming platforms, the gym, and all the small expenses that kept her connected to my income. One by one, I cut those ties. Anthony, as expected, became an additional problem. First came arrogant messages. Dude, you made a huge mistake. Rachel is amazing. It is your loss. I did not respond. Then the texts became irritated. Hey, Rachel is tight on rent this month. Send her money. Do not be selfish. I did not respond to that either. The last message, sent in the early morning, had no trace of pride. Michael, you have to call me. The landlord is threatening to evict us. Rachel is crying all the time. This is your fault. Fix it. The twisted logic they used was absurd. They really believed I should solve the mess they themselves had created. I never went to Europe. I actually moved to a smaller apartment on the other side of the city. It is modest, but it is all mine. The lease on the old place ends this very week. Rachel and Anthony still think I am packing for an international flight. The truth is, I am just unpacking boxes, building my new life in peace. They have no idea where I am. They think I am thousands of miles away, when in reality, I am still in the same city, watching closely as their poorly constructed plan completely falls apart. And the best part is, I am just getting started. Update. A month has passed, the initial impact is behind me, and now I am dedicated to following the side effects, those aftershocks that come after the first blow. The story has taken a turn that not even I had foreseen. My initial intention was simply to walk away cleanly, letting the mediocrity of their strategy lead them to ruin. However, I discovered that when someone builds their life on a mountain of lies, the collapse is much more spectacular than one imagines. After a week of receiving increasingly desperate messages from Anthony, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Rachel's mother. I had always maintained a cordial relationship with her parents. They seemed like reasonable people. I was wrong. She did not waste time on greetings or formalities. She attacked me directly, accusing me of having abandoned her daughter, of leaving her helpless and in ruin. She called me cruel and heartless. I let her speak until she finally stopped to take a breath. Then I responded calmly. With all due respect, ma'am, Rachel made the decision on her own to go live with another man. I, in turn, made financial decisions that are my own. Her reaction was immediate. She is your girlfriend. You have an obligation to take care of her. Actually, I do not think she is anymore, I replied. And before you talk to me about my responsibilities, I suggest you ask Rachel what hers were to me and to the plans we shared. That conversation was just the first shot in a campaign of manipulation, an attack of guilt and shame. Shortly after, I started receiving calls from mutual friends. They all seemed to be repeating the same adulterated version of the story, the one Rachel had told them, that I had had a sudden mental breakdown, that I had become controlling, and that I was punishing her for trying to be responsible with money. This did not surprise me since my suspicions about Rachel and Anthony began to solidify months ago. I had started my real work. I am a systems analyst. I interpret data, I find patterns, so I installed software on our home network, not to read their emails, but to observe traffic patterns. I discovered that their data consumption on the computer and phone increased drastically in the early morning, right when she said she was working, and almost all of it was directed to social networks and messaging applications. I also noticed that on grocery orders paid from our joint account, expensive items appeared that never arrived at our house. Luxury cuts of meat, expensive liquor bottles. The last piece of the puzzle came when I investigated not her, but Anthony. His financial situation was much worse than I thought, 2 previous evictions and several unpaid debts. And the owner of the apartment where he lived was not a large company, but a private landlord, someone much more likely to take swift action against a delinquent tenant. I compiled everything. Data records, purchase receipts, public eviction documents. I saved it all in a digital folder, my insurance policy. So, when the first friend called to reprimand me, I did not argue. I just said, I think you have only heard one version. Allow me to send you some context. I shared a link to a password-protected website that I had prepared myself. There I laid out the entire timeline without emotion, just with evidence. I included screenshots of the grocery orders showing products that were not for our house, public records of Anthony's financial instability, and most compellingly, transcripts of the audio recordings from our security system. That system recorded sounds when activated or deactivated and had captured several conversations between Rachel and Anthony while I was sleeping or at work. What I heard was disgusting. They had been planning it for months. It was not about saving money. It was a deliberate plan. She would move in with him while I continued to cover her car, her phone, and her personal expenses under the guise of our relationship. With that money, she would support Anthony and help him avoid another eviction while he set up his new business. They made fun of me. They called me the perfect long-term investment, even their retirement plan. Every person who contacted me received that link. The call stopped immediately. The smear campaign died before it was born. I had not only neutralized their story, I had pulverized it with cold, verifiable facts. The best part came later, the call from her father. He was a proud man, and you could hear the humiliation in his voice. He had seen the evidence. He did not shout. He did not argue. He just said, I would like to coordinate to pick up Rachel's things at your new address. Somehow he had managed to find out where I lived, but I did not care. I replied that I would leave the boxes on the building's loading dock on an agreed-upon day. He accepted. Then he asked the question I was expecting. The car, she needs it for work. Would there be a way for her to take over the payments? The car has already been sold. I lied without hesitation. In reality, the vehicle was safe in the garage of my new building. It was a wise financial decision to keep it under my control. The silence that followed on the other end of the line was my victory. I knew perfectly well that he had no way out. He understood that his daughter had fallen into a plan so absurd and greedy that it was indefensible. Rachel and Anthony are now facing the full consequences of their actions. Their landlord, to whom I may have anonymously provided information about the financial history of his tenants and the fragile employment situation of the new roommate, initiated the eviction process. Rachel was unemployed. Her company, a small firm where reputation is everything, decided to let her go as soon as rumors about her unethical maneuvers began to circulate. It turned out that one of our acquaintances worked in the same sector, and the news spread quickly. They were both trapped in an unaffordable apartment with no friends to turn to. They thought they were strategists, but in reality, they were simple amateurs who chose the wrong target. They tried to manipulate a system without understanding that I am the one who builds the systems, and I always include a security mechanism. Final update. 6 months have passed since my old life was left behind and the new one began. The dust has settled, and the silence from them is total. The story has concluded, and I can say without a doubt that I won, not just the battle, but the entire war, and I did it without needing to raise my voice. The eviction I mentioned earlier was completed. Rachel and Anthony were kicked out of their apartment. The image of them trying to move their belongings without a car, a detail I learned thanks to an old mutual friend, gave me a serene satisfaction. That supposedly brilliant plan, hatched over months of calls and secret meetings, ended with both of them standing on a sidewalk, surrounded by boxes they could not transport. Just as I predicted, Anthony could not handle the pressure. He blamed everything on Rachel, accused her of ruining his life, of bringing her drama into his world, and of causing him to be evicted. That friendship so proclaimed as family fell apart as soon as the money ran out. He returned defeated to his hometown to live with his parents. A 30-year-old man broken by his own arrogance. Rachel suffered an even harder blow. After losing her job and the place where she lived, she had no choice but to go back to her parents' house. But the home she returned to was not the warm refuge she expected. Her father, a man obsessed with reputation, was deeply ashamed. He had seen the evidence I compiled and knew the truth. She had a roof over her head, yes, but not understanding. She became a stain on the family name and was treated as such. I learned from third parties that she has had serious difficulties finding another job. The sector she worked in is small. Information travels fast, and her name was tarnished. The attempt at manipulation, backed by irrefutable evidence, made her an undesirable person. The cost of her short-sighted strategy is prolonged indefinitely. The most gratifying outcome of all occurred a couple of months ago. I received a formal letter from a lawyer Rachel had hired. It was a desperate claim seeking some kind of compensation for our 4-year relationship. It was full of legal terms about emotional damages and implied partnership. My lawyer, a firm and sharp woman, was already prepared for that move. We did not just respond with another letter. We filed a counterclaim. We filed a civil lawsuit against Rachel and Anthony for conspiracy to commit fraud. Our case was solid. We had audio recordings where they planned to use my income to support him. We had the financial records that showed how the money from the joint account was diverted for Anthony's benefit. We had text messages in which he demanded that I send money to Rachel. We even included a sworn statement from the former landlord, who recounted the nature of their lease and the conversations he had had with them. The intention was never to get money. What I sought was to set a precedent, a strong message that I would not be a victim. Rachel's own lawyer resigned from representing her just 1 week after receiving our lawsuit. Without the financial resources to hire another, she had no choice but to sign an agreement. In that document, she formally and definitively waived any claim against me, both present and future. In addition, she had to accept a confidentiality agreement that legally prohibits her from speaking or writing about me or our relationship. Now, my protection against any attempt at defamation is total and legally ironclad. Today, I am left with everything. My finances remain firm, My career continues to grow, and my new apartment, far from the past chaos, feels like a true refuge. From this experience, I learned a costly but irreplaceable lesson: the need to verify the truth and not to take anything for granted, not even in the personal realm. The supposed job in Europe never existed. It was a carefully calculated maneuver to force them to show their true intentions. I never had any intention of leaving, because from here I could watch closely as their plan fell apart without remedy. Rachel and Anthony thought they could take advantage of me, that I was a stable and predictable figure, someone they could manipulate without consequences. They did not understand that what seems most solid is often the hardest to break, and that apparent silence holds the greatest power of control. They tried to challenge me as if it were a simple game of wits, without realizing that I already knew all the possible moves. It was not just about defeating them, but about dismantling, piece by piece, the structure they had built on lies. Today my life is different, more serene, clearer, and freer. The noise is behind me. What remains is not emptiness, but a silent order that finally feels like victory.